Hi there, it's Simon Gray from Career Codex with another weekly video about everything to do with how to find success in the job market. And this week I conducted a webinar, in fact last night, on how to find success at executive job interviews, and really engaging group of people on the line, asked me lots and lots of questions. And what I explained on that webinar was that there are three things that you really need to do. The first thing you need to do is to prepare properly and to prepare better than any other candidate in that process. And I talked about the staircase of preparation to be able to do that. I then talked about what you do on the day of the interview and how you control the interview from start to finish by establishing what I call a higher baseline. And then finally, and the thing most people forget is well, how to follow up properly. Because if you follow up in the right way, then you're still keeping yourself in the mind of the interviewer, and the interview carries on even after the interview is over. So if you didn't catch the webinar live, if you're watching this video in the newsletter, you'll find it in the weekly newsletter. If you're watching it on YouTube, I'll put the link in the comments or narrative box below. So what I wanted to talk about today was the three documents that if you're serious about your chances of finding success at an interview, that you really need to think about putting together. I want to say documents, yes I mean documents, which I mean putting pen to paper or getting the laptop out and typing something out on Word, because whatever you commit to paper tends to have more power. It's got permanence, you can refer to it, you may have thought it, but once you put it down on paper, of course, you've had to think about it in a far deeper level, which means you commit it to memory, so it etches on your brain for further reference. And in the interview, of course, you can then draw on that memory because you use these documents in the interview. So what are these three documents, I hear you ask? Well, the first document is what I call the catalyst. So imagine you're applying for a job. You've got to know why you're applying for that job. And it's not just a job, it's this job. Well, it is in the employer's mind anyway, because an employer wants to know that you're not just applying for a job, that their job isn't just one of many. They want to feel special. They want this to be the job that you really want. And they want that for a number of reasons. You know, we all like to be valued. We all like to feel that what we have to offer is special. And it's exactly the same with the employee who's put that job out there. And the other thing is people like to mitigate risk. So if the employer knows that this is a job of many, that one of many jobs that you're looking at, then they may just start to think, well, how serious is this candidate about this job? And of course, if I offer this candidate the job, well, there's a really high probability that they may go and accept a job elsewhere. So I've taken them through this process only to be disappointed at the end. And trust me, having spent 10 years in the recruitment industry, no employer likes to offer a candidate and have that offer turned down. So getting very clear about why you want the job and then communicating that to the employer that this is the job that you really want is very important. Now, I know that anyone in the job market, anyone watching this, has probably got a multiple of opportunities on at any one time, or may have more than one job opportunity that they're looking at. And that's absolutely fine. But what's important, and the big distinction, is that when you're in front of an employer, you communicate to that employer that their job is the most important. It certainly is at that moment because you're interviewing with them. And of course, you have to go through the interview to really understand what the job is all about, because a job specification, a narrative, a brief from a recruiter will only tell you so much. You actually find out what you need to know going through the interview process. So, you know, one of the things you can do is you can let an employer know you're looking at other opportunities, and sometimes that can work well, particularly if you're on interview with one of their competitors. It increases that competitive nature to get you. And also the safety in numbers kind of mentality. So if an employer knows that you're on interview with other businesses, then it kind of gives them some comfort that actually you're a candidate that they should be interviewing. But the distinction, I'll come back to this distinction, is when you're in that interview environment with an employer, it's that job and that job alone that you want. And that's really, really important. So that's the first document, the catalyst. Second document, so with the catalyst, you've got to think about why you actually want that job, which means researching the organisation, thinking about your skills and experience, what you have to offer. But you know, that's the catalyst. Second thing is the bridge. So you've got your catalyst, now you've got the bridge. So you've got to think about what the most important thing, what the most important things rather in the role that you need to be pitching your experience against. So, an employer will make a decision on you as to whether you're right for the job based on certain decision points. They'll be looking for certain things. And it may tell you this in the job specification. It may not. But if you do your research properly, you can generally find this stuff out. And then what that means is you position your relevant skills and experience in the form of achievements in front of the employer at interview to address those decision points. Now, if you're an executive in the job market, it's not just about the requirements of the job that you need to think. You've got to start to think about, well, what keeps the present incumbent in the CEO role or president role, what keeps them awake at night? What are the bigger issues in the business that are troubling them? And then you have to think about, well, okay, those are the issues, but what are the opportunities around the corner that this business could take advantage of? And if you start to think about those and then think about requirements that may be needed in the role to address those, you're then thinking at a higher level than most other candidates in the process. And then, of course, you think about your skills and experience, turn those into achievements, and pitch those against those bigger issues and the requirements that are generated from those bigger issues. And a really simple way to do it, you take a piece of A4 paper, draw a line down the middle, left-hand side, you write down the 4 or 5 things, big issues, requirements of the role. The right-hand side, you write down an achievement for each of those. And why achievements? Well, skills and experience are one thing, but achievements talk about a journey. They talk about change. They talk about value added, because there's a starting point, a situation you inherited, you did something, there was a quantifiable outcome. And storytelling is hugely powerful. Achievements are storytelling. And those of you who watched my video, I think it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, on competency-based interviews will know that the best way to handle competency-based interviews is by telling stories of your achievements. So that's the second document. The third document is the 90-day plan. So this is when you're in the interview environment. This is when you use this document. You prepare it ahead of time, and what the document is what you would do in the first 90 days, the first 3 months of your employment, should you be offered a job. And I used this very technique myself to secure a chief executive position a couple of years ago now. Being a recruiter, I had ways and means of finding out who else was in the process, and I knew the other 2 candidates coming back for second interview had far more experience than me. I was actually changing careers, that's even more difficult, but they had far more relevant experience than me. So what I did, I prepared a 90-day plan, and I did all of the research that I advised people to do on the webinar last night, the 5 stages of preparation, and from that I created this 90-day plan. By identifying what the big issues were, what I should be doing to address those issues, and I put it in a 1.5 page document. And it helped me really consolidate my research to know what to talk about at interview. But when I got to the interview, when I established my higher baseline, I said to the interviewers, and it was a panel of 4, I said, look, just to let you know, I've done this research. I didn't tell them what I knew, I tell them what I'd done. And I said, I've actually prepared a 90-day plan, which is what I would do in the first 90 days of employment, should you offer me the job. Very happy to share it with you or leave it with you at the end. And guess what they said? They said, well, let's talk about that now. So whatever questions they got planned for me went out the window. It was my terms now in terms of how that interview progressed, because I was controlling the process and talking through my vision for the role. With an important caveat, by the way, that this was from the outside looking in, and of course there were things I could never understand till I was actually in the business. But the big distinction here, I'm talking about distinctions today, was I was no longer just an applicant. I was actually showing them what I would do in the role. So they were visualizing me in the role, which gave them comfort in my ability to do the role. And of course, employers can be risk averse. They want to make the wrong hire, which is why we have these interview processes. But by telling them what I was going to do, as opposed to demonstrating what I would do based on what I'd done, took me further along the journey in terms of convincing them that I was the right candidate for the job. And lo and behold, I got offered the job, and fantastic. So it works. So you prepare the 90-day plan, you offer to share it, you can leave it with them at the end, but you need that important caveat as well. So if you're in the job market, if you're approaching an interview, you've got to think about the preparation that you need to do. Watch the webinar. I'll put the link in the newsletter if you're watching this in the newsletter, or I'll put it in the YouTube narrative below, so you can check that out. So you need to do preparation, and then you need to prepare 3 documents. Your catalyst, which is why you want the job, this job, the employer's job, because they'll probably ask you. And then the bridge, which is how you connect the bigger issues and opportunities with the company, with the requirements of the job specification to your skills and experience that you position in the form of achievements. And then, of course, the 90-day plan, which brings everything together. So the 90-day plan really is the product of the research, the catalyst, and the bridge. Put that together, you've got a plan for the first 30 days of employment. So if you missed last night's webinar, depending on when you're watching this video, I'm doing a repeat next Thursday, the 5th of May. Although you can watch the replay, if you come on the webinar live, you have an opportunity to ask your questions. And I spent about half an hour last night dealing with all sorts of questions on how to handle certain situations in interviews, including one person on the line who told me they lost their contact lens. What should they do? Yeah, I answered that question as well. So please check out that webinar. Now, if you're watching this in the newsletter, of course, you're subscribed to my weekly careers newsletter. If you're watching this on YouTube and you like what I'm talking about, the content resonates with you, then please visit careercodex.com. Again, I'll put that in the narrative box below. Sign up for the weekly newsletter. I put out a lot of free content, a lot of free webinars, a lot of free online events, which you're more than welcome to join. So that's probably enough for today. So if you're preparing for interview, think about your catalyst, think about your bridge, and think about a 90-day plan. And I'll talk to you again very soon.